Three young, identical triplet girls vanished without a trace from a small Arizona town in 1983, disappearing while playing in their backyard garden. But 32 years later, their mother spots a crucial detail hidden in one of their old photographs. A shocking discovery that would expose what really happened to them. Before continuing this amazing story, let us know where are you watching from today. Also subscribe Storyboat if you want daily stories like this. Let's begin our story. The afternoon sun blazed down on the modest suburban neighborhood in the rural outskirts of Arizona, near the New Mexico border. Diana Santos adjusted her wide-brimmed hat as she stood in the backyard of the Martinez family home, watching children play and adults mingle at young Elena Martinez's birthday party. At 62 years old, Diana still carried herself with dignity, though the decades had carved gentle lines around her eyes that had spent countless hours scanning faces in crowds, always searching. Her husband, Marcus, 2 years her senior, stood chatting with some of the men by the grill. They had arrived an hour ago, joining the celebration, as the neighborhood had done for generations. The birthday song had been sung, candles blown out, and cake distributed. Children now played freely, while adults engaged in casual conversation. Diana was half listening to her neighbor Rosa's story about her vegetable garden when movement at the patio door caught her attention. A man she didn't recognize stepped into the backyard, holding the hand of a young girl around 8 years old. "Sorry we're late," the man announced to no one in particular. "Something came up at home." The girl immediately broke free from her father's grip and darted toward the other children playing in the yard. As she ran past, Diana froze. The child wore a light purple dress with delicate floral print and white ribbon sashes tied at the waist. Her dark, curly hair bounced as she moved. Something about the combination struck Diana like a physical blow. Without excusing herself from the conversation, she moved quickly across the yard, her heart hammering in her chest. She reached out and grasped the girl's shoulder, turning her around to face her. "Where did you get that dress?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hand moved instinctively to touch the child's curly hair. The girl's eyes widened in alarm. She twisted away from Diana's grasp and ran toward her father. "Daddy! Daddy!" she cried out, her voice high with fear. The man looked up concerned and immediately started walking toward Diana, who stood rooted to the spot, trembling slightly. "Is everything okay?" the man asked, placing a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. His tone was more curious than accusatory, but his body language was clear. He was worried about what had just happened. "She touched me," the girl said, pressing against her father's side. "She scared me." The man's expression hardened slightly. "What's going on? Why did you grab my daughter?" Diana's mouth opened, but no words came out. She reached toward the girl's clothing again, her fingers stopping short of actually touching her. "That dress? Where did you get it?" "Excuse me." The man stepped between Diana and his daughter. "What's your problem, lady?" Marcus appeared at Diana's side, along with several neighbors who had noticed the commotion. He wrapped a protective arm around his wife's shoulders, taking in the scene with a quick glance. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the slight tremor in his hand. "My wife didn't mean any harm." He looked at the girl, and Diana felt him stiffen beside her. "Your daughter's dress, it's very similar to what our girls wore. Our daughters, they were triplets. They went missing 32 years ago. They had light purple dresses just like that with floral prints and white ribbon sashes. It must have shocked my wife." The neighbors murmured in understanding. Mrs. Martinez, the party host, stepped forward. "It's true," she said softly to the man. "The Santos girls disappeared back in 1983. Terrible tragedy. The whole neighborhood searched for weeks." The man's expression softened immediately. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." He looked down at his daughter's clothing. "I bought this dress months ago at a department store. I can't remember exactly when." Diana, still stunned, pleaded, "Please, could I just look at the dress? I just want to see if it's the same style." Marcus gently held her back. "Diana, honey, the girl is not Sophia, Isabella, or Valentina. Let's not upset her further." He turned to the man. "I apologize for my wife. This has been difficult." Mrs. Martinez touched Diana's arm. "Diana, dear, you look so pale. Maybe you should go home and rest." Marcus nodded gratefully. "Yes, I think that's best." He thanked the party host, excused them from the gathering, and nodded respectfully to the father and daughter. "I wish we had met under better circumstances." "I'm truly sorry for upsetting your wife," the man said sincerely. "I honestly had no idea. We're new to the neighborhood and thought attending the birthday party would be a nice way to meet everyone." "It's not your fault," Marcus assured him. Marcus guided Diana out of the backyard, supporting her as they walked the 3 blocks to their home. Once inside, he helped her to the sofa and went to the kitchen to make tea. When he returned, he helped her take a sip from the steaming cup. Diana's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to scare that little girl," she said, her voice breaking. When I saw that dress." Marcus nodded, sitting beside her. "I know you had an anxiety attack. It's okay." "I can't forget them, Marcus," Diana said, tears streaming down her face now. Even after 32 years, Marcus took her hand in his. They would be adults now, all 3 of them grown women. "I know," Diana whispered. "I feel so embarrassed, always bringing up the past, making everyone uncomfortable." "We don't have to forget our daughters," Marcus said firmly. "I was shocked, too, when I saw that girl's dress. They were so similar. Light purple with floral prints, white ribbon sashes, long sleeves." Diana sat up straighter. "I want to see their photos again, Marcus. The ones where they're wearing those dresses." Marcus hesitated. "They're in the box in the garage. We haven't opened it in over 20 years. "Please," Diana said, "if it will help me calm down." Marcus sighed, but nodded. "I'll get it for you." Marcus agreed. The kids thought it was the most amazing thing they'd ever seen. "We were such a tight community back then," Diana murmured. "Everyone knew each other, and Mr. Thomas was such a kind man. The children adored him." She turned the photo over, checking for any notes, then back again, examining it more closely. "Are you absolutely sure this image was taken on the day they disappeared?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because Mr. Thomas had moved to a different town by then," Diana said, her brow furrowing. "Remember how sad all the parents were when he switched schools? The kids loved him so much we threw him a farewell party at the school the day before he left." Marcus frowned. "I'm certain this was taken the morning of their disappearance. They disappeared in the afternoon." "But that's strange," Diana insisted. "Mr. Thomas had supposedly moved from town a week before the girls disappeared. So, how could his Camaro be parked there in the photo?" Marcus set the album aside and rummaged through the box again, searching through the items they had already removed. Finally, he found what he was looking for. The original Kodak photo envelope with the film negatives still inside. The processing date was stamped clearly on the outside. "Look," he said, showing Diana the date. "This confirms it. The film was developed 2 days after they disappeared. These were definitely taken that morning." Diana rubbed her arms, suddenly chilled despite the warm air in the room. If that was really Mr. Thomas's car, then he might have seen something suspicious in the neighborhood that day. The police would have questioned him. She paused, thinking. But they never mentioned interviewing the art teacher, which means he must have truly been gone before the girls disappeared. Marcus noticed Diana's increasing agitation and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Diana, it could be a coincidence. It might not even be Mr. Thomas's Camaro. It could have belonged to anyone." "But I don't remember anyone else in the neighborhood who had a Camaro," Diana countered. We were very close with everyone. We would have known. Maybe it didn't belong to a local, Marcus suggested reasonably. It could have been a visitor to one of the neighbors. You shouldn't overthink this, honey. The police examined all our family photos, including this one. They questioned everyone and followed all leads. If it had been Mr. Thomas's Camaro, they would have noticed the license plate and confirmed it to us. Diana took a deep breath as Marcus urged, accepting another sip of tea from the cup he offered. The warmth seemed to calm her slightly. You're right, she said finally. It's probably nothing. Marcus nodded in relief and closed the photo album. Diana had removed the photo, wanting to keep it close. Together, they began gently returning the items to the box. Each memento a fragment of the lives their daughters had lived and the futures they were meant to have. After packing everything back into the box, Marcus glanced at the ornate clock on the mantel and jumped to his feet. Good Lord, I completely lost track of time. I have my checkup appointment today at 11:50 a.m., and it's already 11:30. It's Saturday and the clinic only opens until 1 o'clock p.m. Diana looked up from the photo album, surprised. I totally forgot to remind you. Dr. Peterson doesn't like it when patients are late. She quickly helped Marcus gather what he needed. His health insurance card, the list of medications he was taking, and the journal where he'd been recording his blood pressure readings. Within 5 minutes, Marcus was ready to leave. Are you sure you'll be okay by yourself? He asked, pausing at the door. I'll be fine, Diana assured him. I'll make some lunch, maybe take a nap this afternoon, and I'll have dinner ready when you get back. Don't worry about me. Marcus nodded, kissed her cheek, and hurried out to the car. It might be good to meet with Mr. Thomas again to see what he was doing now. Perhaps she could show him the picture and ask if the Camaro was his. Checking the clock, 11:45 a.m., Diana realized she could still make it to the address today. It was only a 90-minute drive. If she left soon, she could reach the ranch by early afternoon with plenty of daylight remaining. She picked up her phone and called Marcus at the clinic. Marcus, how's your appointment going? I'm still in the waiting room, he replied. Everything okay? Yes, but I found some interesting information. Diana explained what Patricia had told her about Thomas's ranch. I'd like to go there today, Marcus. Would you come with me? There was a pause. I don't know, Diana. I'm a bit worried about you. You seem fixated on this Camaro coincidence. I'm fine, she assured him. I don't want to overthink this or have bad feelings toward Mr. Thomas. He was always so kind. The art therapy ranch looks interesting, and it would be nice to catch up with him after all these years. All right, Marcus agreed. But we should call him first. Let him know we're coming. I didn't find a phone number, just an email address. I'll send a message, though they might not see it before we arrive. They agreed to meet at the clinic since it was on the way to the ranch. Marcus would finish his appointment, and Diana would take the bus to meet him there. I'll leave right away, Diana said, already reaching for her purse. See you soon. Diana left the house with a sense of purpose, locking the door behind her and walking briskly to the bus stop 3 blocks away. The Arizona heat was building as the day progressed, and she was grateful when the bus arrived just as she reached the stop. The 15-minute ride to the medical clinic passed quickly, as Diana's mind churned with questions about Thomas Brennan and his Camaro. As she stepped off the bus, a young woman in a straw hat and bright yellow t-shirt thrust a colorful flyer into her hand. Desert Agricultural Fair this week, the woman announced cheerfully, before moving on to the next disembarking passenger. Diana glanced at the flyer as she walked toward the clinic. It advertised a week-long agricultural event that had started yesterday. She folded it and put it in her purse as she entered the medical building. Marcus was just finishing up with the receptionist when she arrived. Perfect timing, he said, signing his final paperwork. Dr. Peterson says everything looks good. Blood pressure is stable. That's wonderful news, Diana said, relieved. Are you ready for our drive? Marcus nodded, though she could see the concern in his eyes. I sent that email to the ranch while I was waiting. Let's hope they got it. They walked to Marcus's car in the parking lot. The afternoon sun was intense, and they were grateful for the air conditioning once they got inside. Marcus programmed the ranch's address into their GPS system. It's about 85 miles northeast, he said, studying the route. Looks like we'll be driving through some pretty remote desert areas. That makes sense for a ranch, Diana replied, settling into the passenger seat. Lots of space for the programs he runs. As they pulled out of the clinic parking lot and onto the main road, Diana felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She clutched the photograph in her purse, the image of her 3 daughters, and the mysterious yellow Camaro burned into her memory. The landscape gradually changed as they drove away from town. Suburban neighborhoods gave way to open desert, with sagebrush and cacti dotting the horizon. Mountains rose in the distance, creating a dramatic backdrop against the clear blue sky. It's beautiful out here, Marcus observed. I can see why someone would want to start a ranch in this area. Diana nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about the timeline discrepancy, the farewell party that apparently never meant what they thought it meant, and the yellow Camaro that shouldn't have been in that photograph. Marcus, she said softly, what if we're wrong about Mr. Thomas? What if there's an innocent explanation for everything? Then we'll apologize for bothering him and go home, Marcus replied gently. But Diana, what if you're right to be suspicious? What if there's something we missed 32 years ago? Diana looked out at the vast desert landscape and wondered what answers they might find at Thomas's Garden of Dreams. The drive took exactly 90 minutes, just as Diana had calculated. They turned off the main highway onto a dusty gravel road that wound through the desert landscape for several more miles. Finally, they saw a weathered wooden sign. Thomas's Garden of Dreams, Art Therapy Ranch. The property was larger than Diana had expected. A main house sat surrounded by several smaller buildings, art studios, and what appeared to be dormitories. Young people could be seen working in gardens, painting at outdoor easels, and caring for animals in a small corral. Marcus parked near the main house, and they both got out, stretching after the long drive. The desert air was dry and warm, filled with the scent of sage and dust. A middle-aged woman with graying hair approached them from one of the art studios. She wore paint-stained clothes and had a warm, welcoming smile. You must be the Santos family, she said. I'm Elena Rodriguez, the program coordinator. We got your email just before you arrived. Thomas is finishing up an art therapy session, but he'll be with you shortly. Thank you, Diana said. We appreciate you accommodating us on such short notice. Not a problem at all. Thomas was so excited to hear from old friends from Desert Valley Elementary. He speaks fondly of his teaching days there. Elena gestured toward the various buildings. Would you like a tour while we wait for him? They spent the next 20 minutes walking around the property. Elena explained how the ranch provided art therapy and life skills training for young people from difficult backgrounds. The facilities were impressive. Well-equipped art studios, a ceramics workshop, a small theater, and comfortable living quarters. Thomas started this place about 15 years ago, Elena explained. He wanted to use art to help kids heal from trauma and find their creative voices. Diana and Marcus exchanged glances. 15 years ago would have been around 2000, long after the girls had disappeared. It's wonderful work, Marcus said diplomatically. They were examining some colorful murals painted on the side of one building when a familiar voice called out behind them. Diana, Marcus, is that really you? They turned to see Thomas Brennan, walking toward them. He was older, of course, his dark hair now mostly gray, but his warm smile was exactly as Diana remembered. He wore casual clothes, covered in paint smudges, "Mr. Thomas," Diana said, surprised by how emotional she felt seeing him again. "You look wonderful." "Please, just Thomas now," he laughed, embracing both of them warmly. "I can't believe it's been so long. What brings you all the way out here?" Diana hesitated, suddenly feeling foolish about her suspicions. This was the same kind, gentle man who had taught her daughter's art class. The same teacher who had patiently helped Sophia with her drawing technique and encouraged Isabella's love of sculpture. "We were in the area and heard about your ranch," Marcus said smoothly. "Patricia Warren mentioned it, and we thought we'd stop by to see what you've built here." "Patricia, how is she? Still keeping the school district organized, I hope?" Thomas gestured for them to follow him toward a shaded patio area. "Come, let's sit down. I want to hear everything about what you've been doing all these years." They settled into comfortable chairs under a ramada. Thomas called to one of the young people nearby to bring them cold drinks. "I have to ask," Diana said carefully. "We were looking through some old family photos recently, and we thought we spotted your yellow Camaro in the background of one taken around the time you left Desert Valley Elementary." Thomas's expression grew thoughtful. "The Camaro? Oh, yes. I remember that car. I love that thing, though I barely drove it. Too precious to me, you know?" He paused, seeming to think back. "You know, that last week before I left town, I was having some car trouble with my regular vehicle. I think I did drive the Camaro around the neighborhood a few times while I was getting the other car fixed." Diana felt her heart sink slightly. There was a reasonable explanation after all. "That must have been what we saw," Marcus said, clearly relieved. "I'm so glad you came out here," Thomas continued. "It's been too long since I've seen familiar faces from the old days. How have you been holding up? I heard about—" He paused delicately. "About the girls. I'm so sorry. That must have been devastating." Diana's eyes filled with tears. "It was. It still is. We never found out what happened to them." Thomas reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "I can't imagine what you've gone through. Sophia, Isabella, and Valentina were such bright, creative children. They had real artistic talent." "You remember them so well," Diana said, touched by his words. "Of course I do. Sophia loved drawing animals. Isabella was fascinated by claywork, and little Valentina always wanted to paint flowers." Thomas smiled sadly. "I think about all my former students sometimes, but especially those three. They were special." They spent the next hour catching up. Thomas told them about how he'd left teaching to pursue his dream of using art therapy to help troubled youth. He showed them more of the ranch, introduced them to some of the current residents, and explained his programs in detail. Everything seemed genuine and heartfelt. The young people clearly respected and cared for Thomas. The facilities were well maintained and purposeful. There was no sign of anything suspicious or concerning. As the afternoon grew later, Diana began to feel embarrassed about her earlier suspicions. This was exactly what it appeared to be: a successful therapeutic program run by a caring educator who had found a new way to help children. "We should probably start heading back," Marcus said, checking his watch. "It's getting late, and we have that drive ahead of us." "Of course," Thomas said. "But please stay in touch. And if you're ever in the area again, you're always welcome here." As they walked back toward their car, Thomas suddenly stopped. "Oh, I almost forgot. Diana, you mentioned seeing the Camaro in an old photo. I'd love to see it sometime if you don't mind. I have such fond memories of that car." Diana hesitated for just a moment. "Actually, I have it with me." She reached into her purse and pulled out the photograph. "This was taken the morning the girls disappeared." Thomas took the photo and studied it carefully. His expression grew serious as he looked at the image of the three girls in their matching purple dresses. "They look so happy here," he said softly. "So full of life." He continued examining the photo, then looked up at Diana. You know, this brings back such memories. I remember that day now. Diana felt her heart skip. You do? Yes. I was driving through the neighborhood that morning, and I saw the girls playing in your backyard. They waved at me from the garden. Thomas paused, his expression growing distant. Sophia was wearing different shoes than her sisters. Diana felt the blood drain from her face. Marcus stepped closer to her, sensing her distress. What did you say? Diana whispered. Thomas looked confused by their reaction. I said Sophia was wearing different shoes. I remember because it was unusual. They always dressed identically. But that morning Sophia had on her little white sneakers, while Isabella and Valentina were wearing their brown sandals. Diana grabbed Marcus's arm. Marcus, she said urgently, no one knew about the shoes. We never told anyone about Sophia changing her shoes that morning. Marcus stared at Thomas, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. I don't understand, Thomas said. Is something wrong? Mr. Thomas, Diana said slowly, her voice trembling. How could you possibly know about Sophia's shoes unless you were there that morning? Unless you saw them up close? The color drained from Thomas's face. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the desert wind blowing through the sagebrush and the distant voices of the young people at the ranch. Thomas looked down at the photograph in his hands, then back up at Diana and Marcus. His warm, familiar smile was gone, replaced by something Diana had never seen before. I think, he said quietly, we need to talk. Thomas looked up at them with hollow eyes. I buried them on the mountain property, under 3 oak trees that grew close together. I thought it was peaceful there, overlooking the valley. I stayed with them for hours, just sitting there, trying to understand what I had done. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. Wait, Thomas said quietly. There's more you need to know. Diana looked up at him through her tears. More? What more could there possibly be? The cabin property. I sold it years later. But before I did, I moved them. Thomas's voice was barely audible. I couldn't bear the thought of someone else finding them, or building over their graves. So I brought them here, to the ranch. Marcus stopped dialing. Here? They're here? Thomas nodded slowly. There's a special garden behind my art studio. I created it as a memorial, though no one knows what it really is. 3 small olive trees, planted in a triangle. Each one for Sophia, Isabella, and Valentina. Diana stood up unsteadily. I want to see them. Diana, Marcus said gently. Maybe we should call the authorities first. No, she said firmly. I want to see where my daughters are. After 32 years, I need to know they're at peace. Thomas led them out of the office and around behind the main art studio. There, in a quiet corner of the ranch property, was a small, carefully tended garden. 3 young olive trees stood in a triangle formation, surrounded by desert wildflowers and smooth river stones. A small bench sat nearby, facing the trees. Diana walked slowly toward the garden. They're really here, she whispered. I come here every morning, Thomas said softly. I talk to them sometimes. Tell them about the young people we're helping here. About how what happened to them made me realize I needed to find a different way to help children. Don't, Marcus said sharply. Don't you dare try to make this about helping others. You killed 3 innocent children. Thomas looked down at the ground. I know. I've lived with that guilt every day for 32 years. This ranch, everything I've built here, it's all been my attempt to atone for what I did. Diana knelt down by the first olive tree, placing her hand on its trunk. Sophia, she whispered. She moved to the second tree. Isabella, and finally the third. Valentina. She stayed there for several long minutes, crying quietly. Marcus stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his own eyes filled with tears. Finally, Diana stood up and turned to Thomas. All these years, we wondered. We imagined terrible things, hoping against hope that maybe they were still alive somewhere, that maybe they'd been taken by someone who at least cared for them. I did care for them, Thomas said desperately. I loved them. No, Diana said, her voice stronger now. You loved the idea of them. You loved what you wanted them to be. But you didn't love them enough to let them be children, to let them be happy with their family, to let them live their lives. Marcus had his phone out again. I'm calling the police now. Thomas didn't try to stop him. He sat down heavily on the bench, looking older than his years. I won't run, he said. I'm tired of running from what I did. As Marcus spoke to the emergency dispatcher, Diana took one last look at the memorial garden. We're going to take you home now, she whispered to the olive trees. We're going to take you home where you belong. Elena Rodriguez appeared around the corner of the art studio, looking concerned. Is everything all right? I heard. She stopped when she saw Diana's tears, and Marcus on the phone, with what was clearly the police. Elena, Thomas said quietly, I need you to gather all the residents and staff. There are things they need to know, and there will be police here soon. Elena looked confused and frightened, but she nodded and hurried away. Diana sat down on the bench next to Thomas. Why? She asked simply. Why did you take them from us? Thomas was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a lifetime of regret. Because I was arrogant enough to think I knew what was best for them. Because I confused my own needs with theirs. Because I was a broken man who thought he could fix his brokenness by saving other people. They didn't need saving, Diana said. They needed to grow up and have their own lives, make their own choices, love their own families. I know that now, Thomas whispered. I've known it for 32 years. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching across the desert. The police cars arrived within 20 minutes, followed closely by the county coroner and a forensics team. Detective Maria Hernandez, a seasoned investigator with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, took charge of the scene immediately. Mr. and Mrs. Santos, she said, approaching Diana and Marcus with professional sympathy. I understand this involves a 32-year-old missing persons case. Can you walk me through what happened here today? Diana and Marcus explained their discovery, from the photograph with the Camaro to Thomas's confession. Detective Hernandez listened carefully, taking detailed notes. Mr. Brennan, the detective said, turning to Thomas, who was still sitting quietly on the bench. I need to inform you of your rights. Thomas looked up at her with tired eyes. I understand. I'm ready to cooperate fully. I've been carrying this secret for too long. As the detective read Thomas's rights, the ranch residents and staff gathered at a respectful distance, clearly confused and upset by the sudden police presence. Elena Rodriguez stood with them, her face pale as she began to understand the magnitude of what was happening. The forensics team will need to excavate the memorial garden, Detective Hernandez explained to Diana and Marcus. It will take several days to properly recover and identify the remains. I know this is difficult, but we need to follow proper procedures. Diana nodded, though she was crying again. We understand. We just want to bring our daughters home properly. Over the next few hours, the ranch was transformed into a crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off areas. Photographers documented everything, and specialists began the careful process of excavating the memorial garden. Thomas was taken into custody without incident. Before he was led away in handcuffs, he stopped near Diana and Marcus. I know you can never forgive me, he said quietly, but I want you to know that I've thought about Sophia, Isabella, and Valentina every single day since 1983. They were beautiful, bright children, and what I did to them was unforgivable. Diana looked at him for a long moment. "You're right," she said finally. "I can't forgive you, but I can try to find peace, knowing that the truth is finally out." Marcus put his arm around his wife as they watched Thomas being placed in the back of a police car. Detective Hernandez approached them again. "We'll need formal statements from both of you, but that can wait until tomorrow. For now, why don't you go home and try to rest? This has been an incredibly traumatic day." "What will happen to the ranch?" Diana asked, looking around at the young people who were being questioned by other officers. "That will be up to the courts," the detective replied. "But from what I can see, the programs here appear to be legitimate. It's possible the state will find another organization to take over operations." Elena Rodriguez came over to them, tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Santos, Mr. Santos, I had no idea. None of us did. Thomas seemed so dedicated to helping these kids. I can't believe—" She shook her head, unable to finish. "It's not your fault," Diana said gently. "He fooled everyone for a very long time." As the afternoon turned to evening, Diana and Marcus finally drove home. The desert landscape looked different now. Not mysterious and beautiful, but stark and lonely. They drove in silence for most of the trip, both lost in their own thoughts. When they reached their house, Diana went straight to their bedroom and pulled out the photograph again, the one that had started everything. She studied the image of her 3 daughters in their matching purple dresses, smiling and happy on what would be their last morning. Marcus found her there an hour later, still holding the photograph. "Are you okay?" he asked, sitting beside her on the bed. "I don't know," Diana said honestly. "Part of me feels relieved that we finally know the truth. But part of me wishes we had never found out. At least before. I could imagine they might still be alive somewhere." Marcus took her hand. "But now, we can lay them to rest properly. We can have closure." Diana nodded, wiping her eyes. "You're right. And maybe other families will get answers too." Detective Hernandez said they're going to investigate whether Thomas might have been involved in other missing children cases over the years. "The important thing is that he can never hurt another child," Marcus said firmly. Diana looked at the photograph one more time, then carefully placed it back in the photo album. "Tomorrow we'll start planning their funeral," she said. "A real funeral, after 32 years. They deserve that." Marcus kissed her forehead gently. "Yes, they do, and so do we." 3 days later, Detective Hernandez called with news that would change everything yet again. "Mrs. Santos," she said when Diana answered the phone, "we've made some discoveries at the ranch that I need to discuss with you and your husband. Can you come to the sheriff's office this afternoon?" Diana's heart raced. "What kind of discoveries?" "I'd rather explain in person. Can you be here by 2 p.m.? Diana and Marcus arrived at the sheriff's office precisely on time, both of them nervous about what they might learn. Detective Hernandez led them to a conference room where several boxes of evidence were laid out on tables. "We've been going through Thomas Brennan's personal belongings and office materials," the detective began. "What we found suggests that your daughter's case may not be isolated." She opened one of the boxes and pulled out a thick photo album. This was hidden in a locked cabinet in his private quarters. "I need to warn you. Some of these images may be disturbing." Detective Hernandez opened the album carefully. The first pages showed photographs of children, dozens of them, apparently taken without their knowledge. Some were at playgrounds, others at schools, still others in their own backyards. "All of these photos date from the late 1970s through the early 1980s, she explained. "We've identified several children from various communities where Thomas taught before he came to Desert Valley Elementary." Diana felt sick, looking at the images. He was stalking children for years. It appears so. But here's what's even more concerning. The detective turned to a section near the back of the album. These pages contain what appear to be detailed plans, daily schedules of families, maps of neighborhoods, notes about children's routines and preferences. Marcus leaned forward to look more closely. This is evidence of premeditation going back years. Exactly. And there's something else. Detective Hernandez pulled out another folder. We found correspondence between Thomas and several other individuals, people who shared his interests. Some of these letters date back to the early 1970s. You mean there were others involved? Diana asked, her voice barely a whisper. We're investigating that possibility. The FBI has been brought in to examine potential connections to other missing children cases across multiple states. Detective Hernandez turned to a page near the end of the album. I need to show you this, though I know it will be painful. The page contained 3 photographs of Sophia, Isabella, and Valentina. Unlike the other surveillance photos, these appeared to have been taken with their knowledge. The girls were smiling and posing, clearly comfortable with whoever was behind the camera. These were taken at the mountain cabin he described, the detective explained. Based on their clothing and the lighting, we believe these were taken during the first day or two after he abducted them. Diana broke down, crying at the sight of her daughter's faces. In the photos, they looked confused, but not terrified. They still trusted their teacher at that point. There's one more thing, Detective Hernandez said gently. Hidden behind these photos, we found letters. Letters that your daughters apparently wrote while they were at the cabin. She handed Diana 3 small pieces of paper, covered in a child's handwriting. Diana recognized the writing immediately. Each daughter had distinctive penmanship that she'd helped them practice for homework. The first letter was from Sophia. Dear Mommy and Daddy, Mr. Thomas says, we can't come home yet, but he is teaching us to paint pictures of animals. I miss you. When can we come home? Love, Sophia. Isabella's letter said, Dear Mommy and Daddy, I don't like it here. Mr. Thomas is nice, but I want to come home. I want to sleep in my own bed. Valentina cries at night. Please come get us. Love, Isabella. The final letter, from Valentina, was the shortest. Dear Mommy, I miss you so much. I don't want to learn art anymore. I want to come home and help you in the garden. Love, Valentina. Diana clutched the letters to her chest, sobbing uncontrollably. Marcus held her tightly, his own face wet with tears. I am so sorry to have to show you these, Detective Hernandez said softly, but I thought you needed to know that they were thinking of you, that they wanted to come home to you. Thank you, Diana managed to whisper through her tears. Thank you for showing us. Thomas has agreed to cooperate fully with our investigation, the detective continued. He's provided information about other potential victims and is helping us identify locations where evidence might be found. Other victims? Marcus asked. We believe there may have been at least 6 other children over a 15-year period, in 3 different states. Some cases were never reported because the families were undocumented immigrants. Others were reported but never solved. Diana looked up from the letters. So our daughters weren't his first victims? No, we don't believe so. But finding your daughters may be the key to bringing justice for all of his victims. Detective Hernandez gathered the materials carefully. The forensics team has confirmed the identities of your daughters' remains. We can release them to you for burial whenever you're ready. We're ready, Diana said firmly, still holding the letters. We want to lay them to rest with these letters. They wanted to come home, and now they finally can. Of course, the detective agreed. And Mrs. Santos, I want you to know, your persistence in investigating that photograph saved other families from going through what you've experienced. Thomas might never have been caught without your determination to find the truth. As they left the sheriff's office, Diana felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. The truth was more horrible than she had imagined, but it was finally complete. Her daughters could come home, and other families would finally have answers too. The funeral was held on a crisp October morning at St. Maria's Catholic Church, the same church where Sophia, Isabella, and Valentina had been baptized as infants. The sanctuary was filled with people, neighbors who had searched for the girls 32 years earlier, former classmates of Diana and Marcus, and dozens of people from the community who had followed the case in the news. 3 small white caskets sat at the front of the church, each adorned with purple flowers and a childhood photograph of each girl. Diana had insisted that each daughter's letter be buried with her, along with their favorite stuffed animals that had been carefully preserved in the memory box all these years. Father Rodriguez, who had officiated at the girls' baptisms and had comforted the family during the initial search, led the service. His voice was strong, but emotional as he spoke about lives cut short and the enduring power of a mother's love. Diana and Marcus never stopped believing they would find their daughters, he said during his homily. Their faith, their persistence, their refusal to give up hope, this is what brought Sophia, Isabella, and Valentina home to us today. Patricia Warren read from the Book of Psalms, her voice shaking with emotion. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. During the service, Diana thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. A chance encounter at a birthday party, a photograph that had sat in a box for decades, and the courage to trust her instincts when everyone else urged her to let the past remain buried. After the service, the funeral procession made its way to Desert Rest Cemetery, where 3 small graves waited side by side under a large mesquite tree. The headstone was simple but beautiful. Sophia, Isabella, and Valentina Santos, beloved daughters and sisters, together forever. As the final prayers were said and the last flowers were placed, Diana felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in 32 years. Her daughters were finally home, finally at rest in a place where she could visit them and tend their graves. Marcus took her hand as the crowd began to disperse. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Diana looked around at the desert landscape, the mountains in the distance, and the mesquite tree that would shade her daughters' graves. "Yes," she said. "I think I finally am." In the weeks that followed, the investigation continued to unfold. Thomas Brennan was formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, along with multiple counts of kidnapping. The FBI investigation had identified 5 other children who had disappeared from communities where Thomas had taught, and excavations were underway at several locations. 3 months after the funeral, Detective Hernandez called with an update. "We've found remains at 2 of the locations Thomas identified," she told Diana. 2 families who have been searching for answers for decades will finally be able to lay their children to rest. Diana felt a complex mixture of sadness and gratitude. "I'm glad they'll have closure, but I wish none of this had ever happened." "So do I," the detective agreed. "But because of your determination to find the truth, these families will have answers, and Thomas will spend the rest of his life in prison, where he can never hurt another child." True to the detective's words, Thomas was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During his sentencing hearing, he made a brief statement expressing remorse. But Diana and Marcus chose not to attend. They had said everything they needed to say to him that day at the ranch. Instead, they focused on healing and moving forward. Diana began volunteering with a local organization that supported families of missing children, sharing her story and offering hope to parents who were still searching for answers. "The hardest part," she would tell other families, "is not knowing. Once you know the truth, even if it's painful, you can begin to heal." 6 months after the funeral, Diana and Marcus established the Sophia, Isabella, and Valentina Santos Foundation, dedicated to improving investigations into missing children cases and providing support for families dealing with such tragedies. Their first major initiative was funding a new database system that would help law enforcement agencies share information about missing children across state lines more effectively. On the first anniversary of finding their daughters, Diana and Marcus returned to the cemetery with fresh flowers. As Diana knelt by the graves, she noticed something that made her smile through her tears. 3 small desert wildflowers had grown up around the headstone, purple flowers that bloomed only briefly each year, but returned faithfully when conditions were right. "Look, Marcus," she said, pointing to the flowers. "Purple flowers, just like their dresses." Marcus knelt beside her. "They're beautiful, just like our girls." Diana touched the headstone gently. "We found you," she whispered. "We finally brought you home." As they walked back to their car, Diana felt the desert breeze on her face and thought about the photograph that had started everything. That moment at the birthday party when she saw a little girl in a purple dress and felt her world shift. It had led to heartbreak and horror, but also to truth and eventually to peace. She knew she would carry the grief of losing her daughters for the rest of her life, but she also knew that Sophia, Isabella, and Valentina were finally where they belonged. Home, surrounded by love, remembered and honored by a community that had never forgotten them. The investigation had ended, but the healing would continue. And somewhere, because of their persistence and courage, other families would find the answers they desperately needed. In the end, that was Sophia, Isabella, and Valentina's final gift to the world, helping other lost children find their way home.